this repudiation, right? And I think that's the only word we can use of, the players who didn't make it by their peers, not by the writers, not by, the hundreds of guys who vote through the writers process. What does it mean to you? What does it say to you? And I'm talking mostly, I guess, about the guys associated with steroids, Bonds, Clemens, and Sheffield, but also the other guys who didn't get in. Delgado, although he did get 9 votes. Mattingly, Valenzuela, Murphy.
Well, I think the line about the steroids, and once again, this is it's always hard to know where these lines are drawn, because there's probably there's many people who got away with it, right? I mean, just because Bonds, Clemens became sort of the posters because they were so good in terms of the numbers, we sometimes forget, like, some people kind of snuck in, right? So to speak. And so, as a player, it's offensive to just dismiss like how you got the numbers. And I often hear this about, well, you can't tell the story of the Hall of Fame without the home run leader. Well, yeah, you can. Absolutely you can, because Pete Rose is all over the Hall of Fame. I mean, you have stories that you can tell and learn and see it as maybe a cautionary tale, not necessarily a blueprint of success. There's plenty of ways to be able to tell the story. And by the way, you had the Negro Leagues, you had players that you completely ignored for forever, and didn't even see them as human in many respects. And that story was, baseball was still telling its story. So story is power. And, I think that as a player, of course, I played clean, and, of course it's categorically unfair when people have advantages. And I think it's important to at least establish that. Like, I'm not a voter, and I think this is really difficult as a voter to make these decisions. But at the same time, you have to recognize people who were directly impacted when you're trying to compete against guys that had advantages.
Well, I stopped voting because of this. I mean, I remember I got my first vote in 2007, and I remember one of those years, one of those early years, because let's not forget the Mitchell Report. The whole thing was December of 2007. I think it was the first year I got my vote. And I remember thinking, there's going to come a time when the entire ballot is steroid era. What are you going to do about this? And I think what really, the reason why I stopped voting was because it was virtually impossible to make sense of this in a way that made sense for me. And then the other reason was because I felt like it became a labor issue, that we were penalizing the players, but Bud Selig's in the Hall of Fame, and a bunch of executives are going to get in, the managers are going to get in, but you're leaving it to the writers to punish the players. Now and
you're talking about managers whose teams featured players who
yes,
either implicated or admitted steroid use. Right.
That's right. And so for me, one of the reasons I was stunned is I've taken the position that if they got in, they earned it. If you're Roger or Barry. But if you didn't get in, you also earned it. And so I sort of took that in the middle. And the way I look at it now, Tim, I'm actually interested in your thoughts on this too, is I viewed it as life without parole or parole, right? Or eventually you get out, over. If Bonds and Clemens had been inducted this year, they got in yesterday, everybody who's alive knows they were forced to wait a clear number of years that serves as their punishment. I don't think anyone's going to look at them and go, oh, Barry got in. Well, obviously, future generations, when we're all gone, will just say, okay, Hall of Fame or not Hall of Fame. But it's very clear if you're living now, you're like, okay, Barry Bonds retired in 2007. He didn't get in until 2022. I think people know that. So I was prepared for people to say, okay, enough is enough. But I also, when we saw the vote, and not only the vote, but also the under 5 votes, is a clear repudiation of that idea that bygones are bygones.
And just so everybody knows, these were the 7 Hall of Fame players on the committee: Ferguson Jenkins, Jim Cott, Juan Marichal, Tony Perez, Ozzie Smith, Alan Trammell, and Robin Yount.